Imagine being one of the richest women in Europe, living in a massive castle, surrounded by servants, feared by nobles, and accused of committing crimes so horrifying that more than 400 years later, people still debate whether they were real. This is the story of a woman known as the Blood Countess, a noblewoman whose name became synonymous with terror. Some claim she tortured hundreds of young girls. Others believed she bathed in their blood to preserve her youth. Was she history's most prolific female serial killer? Or was she the victim of a political conspiracy? This is the dark and mysterious story of Elizabeth Báthory. Please subscribe for more if you want to know about the interesting stories like this further. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful noble families in the Kingdom of Hungary. Her family controlled vast lands and possessed enormous wealth. Many members of the Báthory family held important political positions. One relative even became King of Poland. Growing up, Elizabeth received an education that was unusual for women of her time. She learned multiple languages, she studied literature, and she was taught how to manage large estates. At the age of just 11, she became engaged to a powerful nobleman named Ferenc Nadasdy. Several years later, they married. The wedding was one of the grandest celebrations in the region. As a wedding gift, Elizabeth received a massive castle known as Countess Castle. At the time, nobody could have imagined that this castle would later become associated with one of history's darkest legends. Elizabeth's husband was a respected military commander. He spent much of his life fighting against the expanding Ottoman Empire. Because of his brutal tactics in battle, enemies feared him. Many called him the Black Knight of Hungary. While he was away at war, Elizabeth managed their vast estates. This responsibility was enormous. Thousands of people lived on lands controlled by the family. Taxes had to be collected. Disputes had to be settled. Properties had to be maintained. By all accounts, Elizabeth proved remarkably capable. She became known as an intelligent and effective administrator. But rumors would later suggest that something much darker was happening behind the walls of her castle. As the years passed, strange stories began circulating among local villagers. Servants would arrive at the castle seeking work. Some never returned home. Others reportedly appeared with injuries. People whispered that young girls working inside the castle were being beaten. Some claimed screams could be heard at night. But in a society dominated by powerful nobles, few dared to challenge one of the wealthiest women in the kingdom. For years, these stories remained little more than rumors, and rumors were common in an age filled with superstition and fear. Still, the whispers continued, and they grew darker with each passing year. In 1604, Elizabeth's husband died. His death left her one of the wealthiest widows in Central Europe. She now possessed immense power. Without her husband present, rumors surrounding her behavior intensified. Reports began reaching church officials and local authorities. Witnesses claimed that servant girls had disappeared. Others alleged that punishments inside the castle had become increasingly cruel. Yet no serious action was taken. Powerful nobles were rarely investigated, especially those connected to influential families. But eventually, the accusations became impossible to ignore. In 1610, an official investigation was launched. The man leading the inquiry was Gheorghe Thurzo. Investigators interviewed dozens of witnesses, then hundreds. Testimonies painted a horrifying picture. Witnesses described severe beatings. Some claimed victims had been exposed to freezing temperatures. Others spoke of torture involving needles and burns. The most shocking allegations suggested that hundreds of girls may have died over several decades. One witness even claimed a servant had kept a list containing the names of hundreds of victims. However, historians continue to debate the reliability of these testimonies. Many witnesses were reporting stories they had heard from others, rather than events they had personally seen. The truth remains difficult to determine. What is certain is that the investigation would change Elizabeth's life forever. In December 1610, authorities arrived at Countess Castle. According to later accounts, investigators claimed they found evidence of abuse. Some reports stated that injured servants were discovered inside. Others alleged that bodies were found on the property. These accounts helped cement Elizabeth's terrifying reputation. Yet many modern historians caution that contemporary records are incomplete. Some details may have been exaggerated over time. Separating fact from legend has become one of the greatest challenges in understanding this case. Still, the consequences were immediate. Elizabeth Báthory would never be free again. Unlike ordinary criminals, Elizabeth was never given a public trial. Her noble status protected her from formal execution. Instead, she was confined within her castle. Several of her servants faced trial. Some were convicted and executed. Elizabeth remained isolated. Years passed. The woman who once controlled enormous wealth and influence now lived in confinement. Then, in 1614, she died. She was 54 years old. Her death ended one of the most controversial chapters in European history, but it did not end the mystery. Over the centuries, Elizabeth Báthory became a legend. Stories about torture grew more extreme. The famous claim that she bathed in the blood of young women became widely known. Yet historians have found little contemporary evidence supporting that specific story. Many believe it was added decades after her death. Some researchers argue that Elizabeth was indeed responsible for terrible crimes. Others suggest political rivals may have exaggerated accusations in order to seize her lands and wealth. More than 4 centuries later, the debate continues. Was Elizabeth Báthory a monstrous serial killer? Or was she the victim of one of history's greatest conspiracies? The answer may never be known, but her name remains one of the darkest and most chilling in history. If you enjoyed this journey into history's darkest mysteries, subscribe for more stories from the shadows of the past. And tell us in the comments, do you believe Elizabeth Báthory was guilty or framed?